Okay, welcome everyone to the call out beta debate. I'd like to welcome my opponent and welcome everyone who is watching live and who watches recording. Just a quick question for my opponent. You can hear me, right? We're good to go? All right, awesome. So I'm going to be debating the position that Bernie Sanders is in fact a warmonger. And I'd like to start out by a little bit of why this debate is necessary. Why I believe this debate is necessary. I supported Ron Paul back in 2012, was a very, very big fan of his, and really supported him all throughout the election on the principle that he was, although he was a Republican and though he had a lot of Republican economic stances, he was strictly anti-war. That was one of the biggest things that brought me over to his side. And in fact, the Ron Paul campaign flipped me from a neocon to a more of a libertarian, as it were. And so when I looked to Bernie Sanders this year, really hadn't heard that much of him, knew he was a senator, but that's about it. Really looked into him as a possible, even though I might oppose his economic policies, he could actually be anti-war. And that would be a real treat and someone I would be think would be well worth supporting. And unfortunately, looking into Sanders has produced the exact opposite result. And that is why I did not support him whatsoever in the past election. As a note, I will be posting in the comment section after all this is over all of my sources because I think that debates are important for education, and you may just get a little bit in the 20 minutes we each of us have, but you may not get a lot, and I want you to have the sources that I did to research. So first things first, defining terms. This debate, I'm arguing Bernie Sanders is a warmonger. Comparisons, this is usually used as a comparison. He's a warmonger compared to this politician or compared to that politician. But this is explicitly, he is a warmonger. Comparisons are really dependent on whether or not what the bar is for the other comparison. So if you say, is it hot outside? Well, it depends on what the degree used to be. So I argue against using a comparison, argue for using the dictionary definition of warmonger, which is explicitly a sovereign or political leader or activist who encourages or advocates aggression or warfare toward other nations or groups, or according to the Merriam-Webster, one who urges or attempts to stir up war. And only one instance of this is necessary. However, the more instances, the better that advances this side of things. Now, I will be making two arguments for why Bernie Sanders is a warmonger. Number one, his direct support for war, and number two, his indirect support for war based on statements he has made and based on votes that he has made in the legislature. And to finish out my initial statement, I'd like to read one of the most powerful letters I think I've read in a long time. That is from one of Congressman Bernie Sanders' staffers when he was in Congress, May 4th, 1999, when Bernie Sanders supported the bombing, the brutal bombing that killed almost 500 civilians in Kosovo. This is from Jeremy Brecher. Dear Bernie, this letter explains the matters of conscience that have led me to resign from your staff. I believe that every individual must have some limit to what acts of military violence they are willing to participate in or support, regardless of either personal welfare or claims that it will lead to a greater good. Any individual who does not possess such a limit is vulnerable to committing or condoning abhorrent acts without even stopping to think about it. The House Resolution, S-Con Res 21 of 429/99, which authorizes the President of the United States to conduct military air operations and missile strikes in cooperation with the United States NATO allies against the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, supports not only the current air war, but also its unlimited escalation. It thereby authorizes the commission of war crimes, even of genocide. Indeed, the very day after that vote, the Pentagon announced that it would begin area bombing, which the Washington Post characterized as dropping unguided weapons from B-52 bombers in an imprecise technique that resulted in large-scale civilian casualties in World War II and the Vietnam War. It was your vote in support of this resolution that precipitated my decision, and my conscience required me to resign from your staff. I have tried to ask myself questions that I believe each of us may ask ourselves. Is there a moral limit to the military violence you are willing to participate in or support? Where does that limit lie? And when that limit has been reached, what action will you take? My answers led to my resignation. Sincerely yours, Jeremy Brecher, staffer of Congressman Bernie Sanders. And I'll pass.
Thank you very much. It's kind of funny. I didn't find the Kosovo vote, but I'm sure I will before this is over. I'm going to start with an opening statement that I started off with that I wrote earlier, just to kind of set the tone for where I'm at. Just so we all know, we probably both like Ron Paul a lot. We're probably on the same page about 95% of the time. But this one, I just really feel Senator Sanders cannot be labeled a warmonger, either by the denotative or the connotative definition. He has many things that I don't like, but this is not one of them. Beyond public statements like, let us wage a moral and political war against war itself so that we can cut military spending and use that money for human needs, Bernie's record speaks for itself. I would argue that he is a dove that has one vote that is arguably a mistake on his record. In 1993, he voted in favor of military involvement in Somalia. Arguably, I got to find the vote on Kosovo, but I'll find that before the end. Since then, he has consistently voted in favor of humanitarian and diplomatic involvement with foreign dictators rather than military intervention. While he has often voted to fund ongoing military efforts, his initial vote has been no to every intervention since Somalia, saving the authorization for use of military force against entities involved in the 9/11 attacks. That vote on September 14th, 2001 was nearly unanimous and called for our military to go after those directly involved in that horrible attack on our own soil. Even the most stalwart doves or libertarians who are anti-war would have a hard time arguing that such a vote would put anyone on the level of warmonger. Bernie voted to stay out of Bosnia in '95. Even more importantly, Bernie voted to stay out of Iraq. Many Democrats and Republicans have had to second-guess themselves on their vote to invade Iraq, not Senator Sanders. He then voted to get the troops out as quickly as possible every time the opportunity presented itself. In 2012, he voted to speed up the transition of military operations in Afghanistan from the US to Afghani forces. Bernie doesn't have a perfect voting record on war, but he is damn close. If we want to throw this label around and make it completely meaningless, like the social justice warriors of the world seem to want to do with racist, sexist, homophobe, and cultural appropriation, then we can go ahead and call Bernie a warmonger for the times he has voted to continue funding our troops who were already in harm's way, or for sending them to Somalia. But if we want words to continue to carry the weight they are meant to, it is irresponsible and inconceivable to call Senator Bernie Sanders a warmonger. If you can give me the number on was it 42199, I think was the number on the thing, but I'll switch it back to you real fast so you can do that.
I don't know the actual bill number for the Kosovo resolution. That was in 1999, though.
All right, I'll take a look at that. Let me find it real fast. Of course, I was there earlier today, but I don't have it up and running now. All right, it can keep going. I don't care. I'll take my time on this. It's fine. Unless you have something to say, I'm happy to pass it. All right. There we go. So where I'm getting my voting information is from votesmart.org. It's a pretty straightforward, no spin kind of site. And so I tend to like that. I'm going to go ahead and, let's see, 99. Let's go back a couple of years here. See if I can get to 99 quickly without too much problem. And I just, I mean, these letters are oftentimes good sources of what people are actually doing. I just, I want to actually find the vote on Kosovo. I'm probably one page away. Or four, one or four. I'm not really sure which. All right, 2000. All right, 99. Foreign operations, no, that's not it. Appropriations bill. That is fair. Is this all 99? Yeah, no, it's top of 99. Let me find it. I will find it. I swear. I swear I'll find it. All right. There's International Space Station funding amendment that he voted yes on. I don't know if I agree with him on that. Financial Freedom Act of 1990, voted against that. That sounds like something I don't agree with either. Let's see. Economic assistance to Vietnam. Foreign aid. More tough stuff. Military construction, District of Columbia. There are a lot of acts every single year. I just want to make sure I get the right one. National Day of Prayer resolution. He voted nay on that. Flag desecration resolution. He voted nay on that. See, these are all things I probably agree with him on a lot of these things. He's just got it wrong some of the time. I'm only in June, so bear with me. Do you know what month that?
Sorry, I've got it. I'm going to drop the, it's SCON Res 21, Kosovo resolution.
Okay, I'm way past that. I was way beyond 21. Still, yeah, let's see. All right, there it is. GovTrack. So this one's from govtrack.org. Joe Biden was the sponsor of this one. He's a classy guy. So this resolution failed in the House on April 28th. It's a concurrent resolution authorizing the President of the United States to conduct military air operations and missile strikes against the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, aka this is happening in Kosovo, and I need to find who voted for and against. Oh, here, let's do this. Bernie Sanders vote. Oh. Vote. There we go. All right. All votes. Let's see where we go all the way down to the bottom. Oh, in the middle. Where am I? Well, this would be too easy if I could find anything properly on this website. Anyway.
Okay, so I think the problem was I had it at first. I don't want to spend too much time researching, honestly. That was supposed to be done prior to the debate. But keep in mind that Bernie Sanders was a congressman at the time, so the link I gave you was actually to the House vote. Sanders is in there. Sanders is a yay, but you only have 11 minutes left, so I want you to actually get to the content instead of just doing.
Well, essentially, that's most of my content. We can run down all the votes over the years. Again, 1993 Somalia, he voted yes. 95 Bosnia, he voted no. Carib Liberation Act, which was actually a foreign aid act. It was supporting democratic overthrow of Saddam Hussein in 1998. That was a yes. We can, argue that maybe some of those people bought some guns with that money, but I don't know whether they did or didn't. September 14th, 2001, he did vote yes for the authorization of use of military force against those people who attacked us. Again, that's a a nebulous group of people, no doubt about that, but it's definitely was something that almost everybody voted for, and I would say that it's very hard to vote against that, even if you are very much anti-war, when you have people who did come out and attack you. 02, he voted against force against Iraq. 06, he voted against the Global War on Terror Act, which was meant to keep troops in Iraq indefinitely. 06 again, Military Commissions Act, he voted against. That was to take away the human rights of the terrorists. Of course, it passes. 07, Policy in Iraq resolution, he voted yes on that again, which was a vote to remove combat troops. 11, he voted to repeal the authorization of force in Iraq. And then in 2012, he voted for the accelerated transition of military operations to the Afghani government from the United States government in Afghanistan. So his record, I mean, you've picked one thing that he voted yes on when he was in the House, but it was, it's again, he made a mistake with Somalia, and I think he probably made the same mistake again in Kosovo. He chose a winner, and anytime a government does that, there's going to be death and destruction involved. And so, yeah, he was wrong on that. There's no doubt about that. But to go to the extreme of warmonger, I think you need to see something like Chuck Schumer's record, Hillary Clinton's record. The kind of people who, even the most of the Republican side's record, you have to go to those people to see the word warmonger in use. I think that the denotation by itself, maybe one act, he's said yes one time, therefore he's a warmonger. But that's not how we usually use the word. How we usually use the word is to denote somebody who really, really very consistently votes for war, starts wars, wants to be in a warmonger, somebody who is, he's somebody who goes after that thing and seeks it. And I don't believe that Bernie Sanders in any way, shape, or form seeks war. And there's a good body.
All right, thank you very much for some of that discussion. I'm glad we were able to do a little bit of research, put some links down for the audience in below here. I want to respond directly to a few of your points, and then I want to lay out these explicit reasons that Bernie Sanders is a warmonger due to his direct support for war and his indirect support for war. Prior to that, I want to note that you have repeatedly said over and over again one choice, or I think you even maybe said two choices, picking a winner and picking a loser. And I'm going to display that is factually inaccurate. Before I do that, I want to note that because the vote was 213 to 213 in the U.S. House, that Bernie Sanders' vote played a key role and was almost the critical vote in ensuring support for Kosovo in a resolution that later passed the Senate. So I would note that it wasn't just one vote in the sea of many. It was actually one of the crucial votes. That being said, I want to address a few of the points. Number one, I'm really glad that you actually brought up he was pro-Somalia. There's such a dearth of research on Bernie Sanders' war record that I didn't even find that one. So I don't have that one in my list. So we'll add that one to my existing list of his support for various wars. Also, I would note public statements against war are nothing compared to a vote to send war. Public statement doesn't stop money from going to troops. It doesn't stop a war from happening. A vote can stop a war, and it can start a war. Another couple notes, 2-1 AUMF. I would agree that is a very weak argument for anybody trying to say he's a warmonger. 2001 authorization for use of military force was very broad, overbroad, but the nation was attacked, and it was a response to that attack. So it's a weak argument. It's still there probably on my side, but it's a weak argument. I will note that as far as his voting to get troops out, you said he voted to get troops out every single time. However, in a Huffington Post article on 10/18/2015, quote, Bernie Sanders supports keeping troops in Afghanistan. Bernie Sanders repeatedly and continually supported keeping troops in Afghanistan to add to his continual war record. And I want to highlight one other statement you made, which is Bernie Sanders is a dove. So let's talk about this dove. Direct support for war. Bernie Sanders, 1991 Gulf War. Sanders said he wasn't going to let some, quote, damn war cost him the election. He voted for the 1991 Gulf War. 1997 NATO bombing of Yugoslavia, which led to the 1999 Kosovo bombing, as we talked about. During the Kosovo bombing, kerfluffle, 500 people were killed. And staffers resigned in protest, and the Liberty Union Party, which supported Sanders as mayor of Burlington, Vermont, held an anti-war demonstration. Sanders had them arrested. You had the you explicitly stated that Sanders opposed war in Iraq. This vote for a March 21st, 2003 resolution says the opposite. Quote, Congress expresses the unequivocal support and appreciation of the nation to the president as commander-in-chief for his firm leadership and decisive action in the conduct of military operations in Iraq as part of the ongoing global war on terrorism. Sanders also voted several times to keep funding going to Iraq, thereby keeping the war in Iraq going. To the Syrian civil war, he said, quote, I think what the president is talking about is having American troops training Muslim troops, helping to supply the military equipment they need, and I do support that effort. When you support American troops training other troops of other countries, there are two ways we get into war in America. Number one, we send advisory troops there first, and we go train those troops, and we figure, oh, eventually we need to bring our troops in. And number two, we issue economic sanctions on a country like Iran, which Bernie Sanders also supported. Now let's talk about his indirect support for war. He made sure a war happened. The blood is on his hands. However, he did not maybe directly support a U.S. troop intervention in the war. The 1998 Iraq Liberation Act, not during a war, but calling for one. Quote, it should be the policy of the United States to support efforts to remove the regime headed by Saddam Hussein from power in Iraq. And one of his arguments over and over again is, oh, I only supported war when it was a unanimous vote. I only supported war when it was a unanimous vote. Well, guess what? In this vote, 30 progressives and libertarians voted against the 1998 Iraq Liberation Act. Sanders voted for it. Operation Desert Fox, he supported a resolution that authorized a 4-day-long bombing campaign, which struck over 100 targets in Iraq, again, prior to us going to war there in 2002, 2003. 2006, he supported House Resolution 921. House Resolution 921 supported Israel's illegal war against Lebanon. And when he supported that war, War Resisters League David McReynolds said, quote, because of your vote of support for the Israeli actions, I would hope any friends and contacts of mine would not send you funds nor give you their votes. 2006, HR 282, Iran Freedom Support Act. Quote, designate at least one democratic opposition organization as eligible to receive assistance under Section 302, very similar to his support for the rebels in Syria. He supports the overthrow of the democratic, really elected regime of Iran. 2014 support for the Ukrainian coup. Anyone who's paying attention to this debate is probably very familiar with the Euromaidan coup in Ukraine. Senator Sanders authorized the $1 billion aid bill to make sure that coup happened. He also supports the U.S. doesn't get involved in declared wars ever. We don't get involved. We get involved in police actions quite a bit. And we also get involved in wars under the Joint Special Operations Command, or JSOC, where we drop special forces troops or drones or whatever over a country we're definitely not at war with. Sanders supports the United States kill list that makes this happen. Asked by Chris Hayes of MSNBC, quote, do you think what's being done now is constitutional and legal? Hayes asked Sanders, noting the existence of a list of people the government wants to kill. Sanders replied, in general, I do. Now, in conclusion, Sanders is not John McCain. Sanders is not Hillary Clinton. Sanders is not the American Century, Project for a New American Century. Sanders is not Dick Cheney. However, being a warmonger doesn't mean you get to, there is no warmonger light. You're either a warmonger or you're not a warmonger. You advocate for war when it's unnecessary, or you don't advocate for war when it's unnecessary. Sanders and Hillary Clinton's foreign policies are neck and neck with each other. In fact, when Secretary Clinton went to war in Libya, completely illegal, without congressional authorization, without pretty much any type of restraint, Sanders also supported that bombing campaign. And when you look at Sanders, when you look at our Congress, it is really important that we as the American people, When whether we elect or we don't elect the members of our Congress, whether we vote or whether we don't, it is extremely important that we hold these people to an explicit standard. They don't get to change the standard just because 534 of their friends do something worse than they do. They don't get to change the standard just because they're a politician. We don't get to lower the standard for them. In fact, Sanders talked about this on the campaign trail. We don't get to lower the standard for people. There's no double standard for politicians. I would be a warmonger if I did half the things that Sanders said. I mean, imagine if a city council person would be like, yeah, we support all of these things. It would be absolutely insane. And obviously I missed a few because you pointed out his support for the Somalian war. So really what it comes down to is, yes, in the classical term, we have people who are worse warmongers than Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders did not drop nukes on Hiroshima. But because Bernie Sanders has a long and sordid history of continually supporting U.S. foreign policy interventions, U.S. war, funding the war, and being unwilling to stand up when the United States goes to war, he is the exact opposite of a dove. And in fact, he is a warmonger, and he has the deaths, even if it's only tens of thousands. I don't consider you good just because you have supported the deaths of tens of thousands versus supporting the deaths of hundreds of.
Well, I think, it's, I think we almost come down to a semantical argument at that point. I mean, there is no doubt that once you get into, and we're going to agree on all of this, but once you get into being a politician in this country, by your definition, I don't know of anybody who could be called anything but a warmonger. So that becomes, I maybe Ron Paul, but I'd have to research his votes too, and I don't think I've done enough of that in order to confidently say that he wouldn't be on the warmonger list based on your standards. Again, it's comes down to the fact that this guy has very consistently been an anti-war voice, while other people have been very much a pro-war voice, very much sowing fear. And I think that's another thing we have to get into here is the idea of finding that boogeyman. He tends to find the boogeyman on Wall Street, which, for better or worse, he finds the boogeyman on Wall Street while other people are finding the boogeyman, overseas. So I think that there's an aspect to warmongering that is also public intent, and you talked about indirect support, and I do believe that people's words, what they say in public especially, has a big effect on whether or not they are a warmonger or whether they are not anything. I mean, you look at Donald Trump. He's apparently a racist, sexist, homophobe. He may be all those things, but he said a lot of things that lead people to believe that. And I do believe that Bernie Sanders has tended to make public speeches that are very much against having that boogeyman overseas and having war going on indefinitely and sending our children over there. He voted to end the draft when that was up. And that's an important vote to me. That of course got defeated, but that's an important vote to me. He didn't vote to add women to the draft. He voted against adding women to the draft, but he voted back at, I think it was 99. I can't remember the vote. But it was to get rid of the draft itself, which would have meant I wouldn't have had to register. But instead I did. And you say that speeches aren't the same, but really in our culture, in our society, they very much are the way we signal what's going on in the country and what's going around the world. And to say that he's on the par with Hillary as far as warmongering, maybe his voting record might be close, but her ability to continue fear and keep people going after the bad guys is really, really strong. And I think that's a very consistent thing among Republicans and a lot of those big-time, big state Democrats who love sending people to war in order to get more profits for their friends. But So I'm with that. I'm going to send it back over to you if you have anything else to say to what I just said.
Okay, I just threw my my notebook on the floor. I'm a little rusty at this debate thing. It's been a while, but nonetheless, when you talk about, you used a phrase actually there, that if we call Bernie Sanders a warmonger, we have to call everyone a warmonger. Well, first of all, I would absolutely disagree with that statement. In fact, I pointed out one vote at least, and I haven't gone through all of them. I took only like. Anyway, I got back an hour before this debate, so I was furiously researching. But I didn't look up all their votes. And what I have looked up, progressives, libertarians, Ron Paul, people like Brown, they opposed Sanders on several of these votes, making them not as much of a warmonger as he is. But when you say, I have to call everyone a warmonger, I look to a website that probably has a pretty good handle on things, antiwar.com. And if you look at antiwar.com's articles on Senator Sanders, and they've been following him since his career in the Senate and career in Congress, and you look at the list of articles, and it's Bernie hysteria and liberal hypocrisy, Bernie war and the empire's pie, hey, Bernie Sanders attacked the empire. If you look at a website that is explicitly dedicated to making sure our politicians are not war hawks, they give Bernie Sanders an F. And when you look at the statement, we have to call everyone a warmonger. Well, maybe we do. Maybe lives are important enough. I don't care if they're American lives or other lives around the world. Maybe lives in the Middle East are important enough. Maybe lives in Eastern Europe are important enough. Maybe people's lives are important enough that we don't give our politicians a pass and say, oh yeah, you're not a warmonger, no big deal. As long as you only voted for 10 wars instead of 25, you're not a warmonger. As long as you're really careful with how many people you strategically collateral damage, you're fine. I don't think we, as the American people, I don't think we as libertarians, whatever camp you put yourself in, even if you're a Bernie Sanders supporter, I'm not saying you can stop supporting Bernie Sanders. In fact, the people who are supporting Bernie Sanders and are watching what he does, they should be the ones who keep his feet most to the fire. But nonetheless, you cannot make the argument, I don't think, that the fact that we have to call everyone a warmonger in Congress is bad. I don't think, number one, you have to. And number two, although you'd have to call most of them warmongers, I think that's a stance when it comes to human lives, when it comes to people who otherwise wouldn't have been murdered by the United States government. When it comes to human lives, I think that is a stance you not only can take, but you absolutely have to take. And to the point of, oh yeah, Bernie Sanders has talked a lot and he's given a lot of speeches and things like that. Bernie Sanders gave a speech and then votes the other way. If I did that and I said, hey man, I'll be at your party tonight at 10, and then I don't show up, you wouldn't be going, man, you give really great speeches on being at my party at 10. That's an awesome thing. It's called rank hypocrisy is what it's called. And I'm not going to allow any politician, whether Bernie Sanders, whether Ron Paul, no matter what politician is in office, they do not get to change the meanings of terms. Going back to the definition of warmonger, a sovereign or political leader or activist who encourages or advocates aggression or warfare to other nations or groups, and according to Merriam-Webster, one who urges or attempts to stir up war. Yeah, Bernie Sanders may not do it quite as much as everyone else, but he absolutely 100%, without a shadow of the doubt, fits the definition of warmonger. And when we let politicians get away with saying you're a warmonger light or you're just a little bit of a warmonger, when we let them get away with that, that means they'll continue doing that. That means Bernie Sanders will continue voting for. That means Bernie Sanders will continue voting for regime change. That means Bernie Sanders doesn't change. But when we hold our elected officials to a high standard, and it's not a very high standard to hold them to the dictionary, but the dictionary is a decent standard to try to hold them to. That is the only way we will ever achieve any type of lessening of war in this country. And that is why this debate is so important. And that is why I believe it was necessary for us to have this debate. That it's necessary to go through Bernie Sanders' war record. That being said, if you agree with my position, please note it in the comment section. I'm pretty sure that once you click, or if you disagreed at first and now you agree, if you can switch your vote down below. This is a tournament after all. I'm really excited. I'm glad I got to engage you, Brian. It was a very interesting debate. With 30 seconds left, I would say I rest my case.
Okay, you don't get to rest your case again after that. So I think that really it almost does come out down to a semantical argument, just by the sheer virtue of even the word stirs up. Somebody who tries to stir up war, somebody who tries to start, go and start wars. I don't believe, and I think that both his speeches and his votes in general have shown that he's not somebody who goes and stirs up and tries to start wars. He has voted for wars at times. There's no doubt about that. I don't agree with those votes. Probably every time. Maybe not every time, but probably every time. I don't agree with those votes. But when it comes down to it, and you decide to hang it on the dictionary definitions, and to me, those definitions don't say, once it seems like the country is heading that way, he votes for it. That's not what a warmonger is by that definition. So to me, it seems fairly clear that by the definitions that you have stated, Bernie Sanders is not a warmonger. By those definitions, his speeches, the things he says, are the things that matter. His doesn't mean that I believe that's what matters. It's just for the definition of warmonger, what he says is very, very important. Stirring up, trying to start are very different things than just actually voting for war. And again, while I don't agree with his votes for war, regardless, not regardless of how many, but based on what they were, regardless of how many of those that I don't agree with there were, we have to come to the conclusion, unfortunately, that Bernie Sanders doesn't fall into that definition. There are many people who do, and I do believe that having those boogeymen overseas is a very important part of being a warmonger by that definition. And again, using a very strict definition, sure. But when we do come down and make it broader, I think it is very, very, very disturbing that we, as people who believe in not starting war and not going to war where it's not necessary, can't really find somebody to hang our hat on at this point who is going to, speak to those values and actually carry them into the vote. So I think that rank hypocrite is a very fair characterization of Senator Sanders. I think it's extremely accurate. I do believe that he often does talk the talk, but then not walk the walk. But I don't believe, based on the definition, we can call him a warmonger. And I do believe that more often than all those other warmongers, based on your side, he is more on our side than many of the others. So he's not perfect. He's not even great. I think that he's good on a lot of things. I think that he's okay on war sometimes, at least in his votes. But I think he's solid on war in his discourse. And I think that is important. So I will rest my case. You got the first word, but I'm going to give you the last one too. So I'm going to let the time dwindle down here in the next 20 seconds. I want to thank you for letting me come on late. I really appreciate it. I apologize to everybody for that. It sounds like it gave you a little more time to research stuff, so that might have helped you in the end. Anyway, so really, thank you so much. It really has been a pleasure, and talk to you soon. Thanks.
Yeah, I absolutely have enjoyed. Like I said, I'm a little rusty. I used to be a college debater, but I haven't debated in a while. I really enjoyed the debate. I really enjoyed the challenge. Again, if you agree that Bernie Sanders is a warmonger, click agree. If you disagree that he's a warmonger, click disagree. And I look forward to facing you in future debates. And thank you, as always, to QallOut for hosting this debate and for actually bringing debates somewhere besides like Facebook comment sections where they can be slightly more civil. Enjoy.